Hello, this is Dr. Catherine Abernathy. I am here to discuss the EN101 research paper. This discussion is specifically for my fall 2020 English 101 freshman composition papers. Because it is specifically for that class, I'll begin with some specific instructions. If you are not in EN101 and it is not fall 2020, you need to check with your professor to be sure that these specifics that I'll begin with are your specific requirements for your particular paper, or if you have other requirements. These requirements are for the research paper that is due at the end of the semester for fall 2020 for my class only. These specific requirements. First of all, it should be a 3-page minimum research paper. That means that the text of your paper, including the title, your introductory paragraph, your supporting paragraphs, and final paragraph, take up at least 3 pages. I recommend getting at least a couple of lines on page 4. You will follow with a separate page that is your works cited page. So the text of your paper will be at least 3 pages, hopefully a little bit on page 4, plus a separate page, which is the works cited page, and the works cited page is not included in the page count. For this paper, you need to use the Iliad as your primary source. Yes, it should be included on your works cited page. You also need at least 2 secondary sources. And for the paper, you need at least 1 quotation from each secondary source. Those quotations, all quotations, should be in MLA format, and the paper should be written in MLA format. This general guide will also discuss MLA format for in-text citations, parenthetical citations within the text, and how to write the works cited page. For the paper that's due this fall for me, you need to type the paper on the computer. I suppose you could still use a typewriter if anybody still had one, but you need to type your paper in 10 or 12 point font. The font should be Times New Roman or something else that's normal. It should be double spaced. Your paper should be double spaced with standard margins. And again, it should take up, the body of the paper should take up 3, perhaps 4 pages. Okay, those are the specifics for this class. Now for more general guidelines, we will move ahead to an overview. For your overview, I will get first, let's talk about generally the process of how to write the written final form of the paper. As we go along, I'll be discussing how research begins this process. And so the writing part is kind of a reverse of the research and idea gathering process. So first, of course, you choose your topic, and that generally precedes everything else. But as you'll find out, my topic changed as I was working on my sample paper here. So you'll choose a topic and write a thesis statement. Your outline and paragraph order, when you finally write the paper, should follow the thesis statement. The outline and paragraph order follows the thesis statement, so that the thesis statement is sort of a map. Your main points will fall in the order of like 1, 2, 3, and 4, or whatever, and those will be the order of the body paragraphs. You focus the body of the paper on the thesis. You don't go off and talk about something else. If you're talking about Kleos in the Iliad, you probably don't need to talk about eating practices, perhaps. You want only one topic. And the focus, you need to focus the body of the paper on the thesis. Your topic sentences follow the thesis points, and the paragraph bodies, the evidence paragraph bodies should follow the topic sentences. That means that you will have, let's say you're writing about Hector, and your thesis statement is something like Homer celebrates the kleos of Hector in the Iliad by depicting his piety, fidelity, and courage. Then, of course, your topic sentences would be something like you would have a topic sentence saying Homer celebrates the kleos of Hector in the Iliad by depicting his piety. That would be a logical first topic sentence for the first body paragraph. Then your second body paragraph might have a topic sentence, something along the lines of Homer also celebrates the kleos of Hector by depicting his fidelity, and so forth. So you'll have a paragraph about piety, a paragraph about fidelity, and a paragraph about courage. You might actually, since this is a longer research paper than the 5-paragraph essay that we've worked on before, you might have 2 paragraphs on piety, 2 paragraphs on fidelity, and you always save your best point for last, so you might have 3 paragraphs on the courage of Hector. These are just suggestions. You do not, of course, have to write about Hector. Just write about something relevant to the Iliad. Please do not write about the gods. I think it's safe to say that for all classes for which I will use this presentation, I can say, please don't tell me what the gods are the gods of. We do not want a paper on Aphrodite is the goddess of love. Eris is the goddess of discord, etc. I think I typically forbid people to write those kinds of papers. Okay, so focus the body on the thesis, and then you will use evidence that you present in MLA format. You will need your primary source, of course, to provide a good bit of your evidence, and you'll need secondary sources. Hopefully you'll get those from JSTOR. In order to access JSTOR on the University of Mobile Library website, you need to use your student ID as your ID, and the password will be 5555. Please note that that is 4 5s, not 5 5s. If you multiply them or add them all together, you get 20. You don't get 25, if that helps you. I don't know. Anyhow, the password is 5555. Okay. Then the use of evidence in your paper should not include tertiary sources, and I will explain what those are as we go along. Finally, you will, of course, write a works cited page. First, you focus the thesis on the body of your paper. And this is the reverse of what I just told you, that the body of the paper is based on the thesis. And here we are reversing what I just said. Again, the password, though, for the library webpage is 5555. I'll say this a few times. First of all, the evidence in your paper drives the thesis. You cannot have a thesis statement without evidence. And so, although you will write the thesis in the first paragraph of your paper, you need the evidence that you gather first to establish what your thesis is. Now, as I discovered when I was putting together a paper, an imaginary paper on Hector for this presentation, I had to change my thesis because my evidence required it, because I just couldn't find what I wanted on Hector. So you start with the evidence. First, of course, you start with your great idea, which is going to be your topic. You could write on the heroes of the Iliad. You could talk about a topic of the roles of women in the Iliad, eating in the Iliad, the shield of Achilles, shields in general in the Iliad, all sorts of, that's an interesting topic there. I have never thought about the various uses of armor in the Iliad. But anyhow, I digress. I apologize. So you start with your topic, and then of course you need a thesis statement. The thesis statement should be the last sentence in your first paragraph. Your thesis statement should be the last sentence in your introductory paragraph, because this is a research paper. It might be 2 sentences, or it might be a long single sentence. But you do need to have your thesis appear at the end of your first paragraph. Your thesis statement must have at least 3 points. It may have more than 3 points. In that case, you might want to divide it into 2 sentences. Your points should be constructed grammatically in a parallel form. Now, what does that mean? Okay, using my Hector sample. Okay, Homer celebrates the Kleos of Hector in the Iliad by depicting his piety, fidelity, and courage. Piety, fidelity, and courage are all nouns. And they're all single words. They make a nice list. You could change that into a list of adjectives. Homer celebrates the Kleos of Hector in the Iliad by depicting him as being pious, faithful, and brave. You could then have pious, faithful, and brave in a list. That list is made up of 3 adjectives. That's assuming, of course, that you've only got 3 points, but perhaps you find more things about Hector. Okay, the main thing is that you want all 3 points or all 5 points, whatever they are, to have some parallel structure. They could all be ing words. They could be gerunds. They could, they can be adjectives, verbs, whatever. But your thesis statement needs to be constructed in parallel form. Okay, I can give you ing words where I'm talking about the influence of women in the Iliad. Homer celebrates the influence of women in the Iliad by depicting their weaving, spinning, and speaking. Okay, so that's another way of having another example of parallel structure. Now, topic sentences. Your topic sentences should match the thesis statement, and you only want 1 point per topic sentence. If you have seen me in class, this would be a point where I would be jumping up and down saying, you may only have 1 point per topic sentence. Example here, Homer celebrates the influence of women in the Iliad by depicting their weaving, spinning, and speaking. That's my thesis statement, okay? Now, we're going to have a topic sentence that is derived from this. Homer celebrates the influence of women by depicting their weaving. Weaving is only 1 thing. You've only got 1 claim for your first body paragraph, and we would not say that Homer celebrates the influence of women in the Iliad by depicting their weaving and spinning, because we're only going to talk about weaving in the first paragraph. You only get 1 claim to support. You have only 1 claim to support per paragraph, and your topic sentence will tell you what that is. So another thing to notice there is that you have to have evidence in order to write that topic sentence. So if you run out of evidence, if you don't have evidence to support your topic sentence, don't write the topic sentence. Find a different point. Make 1 and only 1 claim per paragraph, and that claim should be relevant to the thesis statement. Now, here is where we talk more about evidence. Again, you need that password, which is 5555. I feel like I'm doing an ad for, I guess I am doing an ad for the library. Okay, I just want to make sure that you know how to get to your sources. First of all, 1 claim per paragraph, women weave. Okay, now that sounds dumb, but we're just it's simplified. We'll get to the pretty topic sentence later. As I said, I was working on a thesis statement on Hector. The problem was I couldn't find anything about his piety. I don't know what the deal was. I really wanted to write a nice paragraph, think about this. I was looking for sources on JSTOR, and I couldn't find anything about his piety. You know, he respects the gods because he won't drink the wine because his hands are dirty. He tells his mother to go make sacrifices. This indicates that he is pious and recognizes the Greek gods. But I couldn't find a nice article on JSTOR. So I reworked as I researched. Here we go. Let's see. I'm going to tell you about this by showing you where it is. See, over here on the right-hand side. I reworked as I researched. because my original topic just did not work. I discovered in the process of researching that weaving is researched and significant in the criticism in the articles so and that I was looking at on JSTOR. So I switched from Hector to the women of the Iliad. I found an article that demonstrates the importance of that topic. Ta-da! There it is. Maria Pantalea says that Helen's weaving is more sophisticated than that of Andromache. And I thought, this is really interesting. Wow, not only do both of them weave, and this shows up within the epic. We see a passage where Helen weaves and where Andromache weaves. It's not insignificant because Homer goes to the trouble of making Helen's weaving more sophisticated. Okay, so when I saw that, I realized that the article demonstrates the importance of the topic, and so I had to come up with something other than a paper about Hector, and so I switched. And I realized that I could write a paper on what Homer says about the women who weave. He also talks about how they spin. And then I realized they're influential because they do some significant speaking as well. If you think about Andromache, she's pretty persuasive when she talks to Hector, telling him, please don't go into battle. And his mother is also kind of persuasive. They don't persuade him, but their speeches are well done. The rhetoric is good. So we could do a study of that. So we could talk about their weaving, their spinning and speaking. I can also, you don't know this because you haven't read the Odyssey perhaps, but you may not know this, but Penelope in the Odyssey uses weaving, the weaving of a shroud, to delay the suitors. She uses weaving as an activity to say, I can't get married yet. So it's something that she it's an activity that stands out in the Odyssey. So I know that Homer thinks that it's important. So as I said above, I reworked as I researched. Okay, so in other words, when you're working on your paper, sometimes you have to work it in reverse, and really, ultimately you do. First, you're going to look for evidence for your topic at the beginning. And you've already done this. If you're frustrated saying, but I've already got an outline. Of course you do. You have found evidence already because you have just spent quite a few weeks reading the Iliad, and something has kind of been highlighted in your mind that is a theme, a topic, something stands out for you for your topic. And so you have already looked for evidence and hopefully you found some. Also, don't forget that your JSTOR ID is your ID number and your password is 5555. Okay, now start with research. As I was just saying, you cannot write a paper that has no evidence. Your evidence should come from your primary source, which is the Iliad. Then you will also need evidence in your secondary sources on JSTOR. Back to the Iliad. For every body paragraph, that is, every topic sentence, every claim, single point claim, you probably should have two pieces of evidence, just like in the Big Mac paragraphs that we have worked on. You needed two pieces of evidence per paragraph. Here, you should probably still have two pieces of evidence from your primary source, so that we know that this is not an exception to the rule when you say that typically when the Greek soldiers eat, they make a sacrifice first. You need two meals where they do that, and you define them. And then we would also know that when Achilles does not have a feast, or he does have a feast, but he does not sacrifice before the feast, in book 24, we see that he does not make a sacrifice to the gods, then we know that's an exception to the rule, and we might say why. So you need probably two pieces of evidence per body paragraph from the Iliad, and then maybe one piece of evidence from your secondary source. Now, here we go, back to that one claim that women weave. Here is another example of that. Okay, so we have one piece of evidence from the Iliad, two pieces of evidence from the Iliad, and then a third piece of evidence that comes from my secondary source. Once you have your evidence put together, you need to organize it, of course. Again, two or more primary text quotes. You could also paraphrase. You might list things from the Iliad. Big deal here, even if you make a list of the meals that they have in the Iliad, if you make a list, there will be meals, feasts that occur in more than one book from the epic. So you could just say, you could make a list of those feasts and refer to the one that is in book 1 when Odysseus takes Chryseis back to Chryses. And there's another feast, say in book 9, where they eat, the men eat before the embassy talks to Achilles. So you could make a list of something like that, have more than two, but you still need to cite them. You can just make the list, and at the end of the list, have something like Homer, 1 dot, 1 period, and then the line numbers where that occurs, comma, 9 dot, 9 period, and the line numbers where the next feast occurs. So you do need to provide a parenthetical reference, even if you just have a paraphrase or a list of several things that happen again in the epic. Okay, now you have your two pieces of evidence from the epic, and then 1 or 2 secondary source quotes or paraphrases. Now, I am saying per topic. That is not the case for the paper that's due for EN101 in the fall of 2020. That's not the case. You only need 2 secondary sources for the whole paper. You only need 2 quotes from secondary sources for the whole paper. This is more generic. This presentation is more generic. And so for a more developed paper, you might need 1 or 2 secondary source quotes per topic. But here we're just going with a shorter paper this semester. All right, now you have this evidence, 2 primary pieces, 1 secondary piece. Now you want to put all of that together and write a topic sentence that covers those points. Make sure that your evidence supports that topic sentence. It should prove that point. It should support that point and be relevant, not off topic. For instance, if one is arguing that the people think that Achilles, no, let's go with the soldiers think that Agamemnon is lousy. You would want to find a quote, say by Achilles, where Achilles thinks or says something indicating Agamemnon's lousiness. So if you're saying that the soldiers think something, you need to make sure that you quote those who think it. You do not just want to prove that Agamemnon is not a good guy. You need to show what someone thinks if you're saying someone thinks it. Okay. Now, you have your topic sentences then, and you want to work on putting them together in parallel form. You can work on that. And then in 1 sentence, this is your thesis statement to cover all of those topics. In 1 sentence, make a claim based on your topic sentences. Okay, so in 1 sentence, that is my 1 sentence thesis statement. Homer celebrates the influence of women in the Iliad by depicting their weaving, spinning, and speaking. You can say in a positive light, something like that. And then edit your thesis statement for parallel structure. We already talked about that. Okay. So this gets us the sources that you will use as your secondary sources. We've talked about your primary source, right? That is the Iliad. Your primary text is not counted in the number of secondary sources to be used. For this 2020 paper, you need 2 secondary sources. The Iliad does not count as one. For fall 2020, you need 2 secondary sources. The Iliad does not count as one of those. The Iliad, the Bible, all scriptures, or the work of focus. So let's pretend you're now in an EN102 class and you are writing about Wordsworth's poem, The World is Too Much With Us. Wordsworth's poem then, called The World is Too Much With Us, is your primary source. It does not count as a secondary source. Whatever you're writing about, that is not a secondary source. Your secondary sources at the college level, these are things that do count. Okay. First, a scholarly book on your topic. That would be great. If you can find a scholarly book about the Iliad, that's great. If you can find a peer-reviewed journal article as found in JSTOR, that works. By the way, the password is 5555. Peer-reviewed journal articles as found in JSTOR, those are secondary sources. Chapters of scholarly books on your topic. If you find a scholarly book on your topic, you could just use a chapter of it. You don't have to use the whole book. Okay. Then, when I say the same, that means the same would be books, journals, or chapters. Those things that are not quite on your topic. So in my case, when I'm talking about women and weaving in the Iliad, I might just find a book or an article on weaving in ancient Greece. That would work. Women in ancient Greece. That could work. I also might find a paper, an article or a book or a chapter that says that Homer can't stand women and makes them look stupid and inept. Okay, if I find something like that, I'm arguing against that in my paper. So I could find an article or a book that says I'm wrong. And then I use a quote from that and say, nevertheless, so Bob Smith says Homer always presents women in a negative light. And then I say, in spite of Smith's view, women seem to be quite intelligent in the way that they speak to their husbands. Okay, something like that. So I could find a quote that disagrees with me. In fact, some graduate students will take an article, a journal article, and use it as the basis of their paper in terms of refuting the thing all the way through. Bob Smith is wrong in this point, Bob Smith is wrong in that point, and just use that as something to argue against. And that works as well. You don't have to do that, though. You can just find one that agrees and one that disagrees. Now, tertiary sources are things to be careful with. Tertiary sources. They may be used to help you learn. They can help you learn, but they are not to be used within your paper. You should not use a phrase, a sentence, a paragraph, etc. within your paper. Just thinking about, for instance, ekphrasis. We talked about the shield of Achilles. It's an example of ekphrasis. At the moment, you don't remember what the word ekphrasis is. That's okay. You may look it up in the dictionary. Now you remember what ekphrasis is. Don't write the definition in your paper. Assume that I know it or I'll look it up. Okay? Do not write the definition in the paper. And please, please do not begin your paper with Webster's dictionary says ekphrasis means. Okay? Your paper should not include a reference to Webster's dictionary because I can go look up the definition. Same thing with encyclopedias. Don't look up. You can look up the definition. It's the dictionary, the encyclopedia, even a reading guide or summary, such as Sparks Notes. You might use that to help you understand the Iliad better or your topic better, or the words that you're using, in any of those things. But it's to help you to learn. but you do not need that information within the paper necessarily. Please don't use phrases, sentences, whatever, from an encyclopedia or a summary. Don't use those within your paper. If you do, you have to cite it. If you do, look at Sparks notes and find something that you mistakenly think needs to be in your paper. If you suddenly put it in your paper for some reason, you must cite it. Anything that appears that is not in your words, well, anything that appears that is not your idea must be cited. Okay. Wikipedia and other Googled references. You might use Wikipedia to find out, I don't know, where Athens is as opposed to Troy. Fine. You can look that up, but Wikipedia is not a source to cite, and it's not a source to use within the paper. You don't use their phrasing, you don't use their words. You don't use their phrasing, you don't use their ideas without citing them, but none of these things, none of these that I'm highlighting here, none of those is a secondary source. To get a secondary source, I mean, this is hard to say, but if you were to use one of these, you have to put it on your works cited page, but it does not count in your secondary sources. Your secondary sources are only scholarly books, peer-reviewed journal articles, chapters of scholarly books. Only these count as secondary sources. Okay, I hope that was clear. Now, how to cite those secondary sources? Use the MLA format. First, using the MLA format within your paper. We have talked about that some in class. It is that parenthetical citation that comes after a quotation or after a paraphrase that must be present. In order to know how to do that, you need to either look in the handbook, or if you lost it for some unforeseen reason, you may go to owl.purdue.edu and use MLA style. MLA right there stands for Modern Language Association. Do not use APA style. This is a humanities class, not a social sciences class. So you can go to owlpurdue.edu and use their MLA style guide. This is a long web address. You can Google OWL, just like the bird, OWL, Purdue, Purdue, as two separate words, and then MLA, and that should bring up this page. At OWL Purdue, you can find a sample works cited page. You can also find samples of entries for the works cited page and directions on how to cite your sources. Really, probably the easiest thing to do is go to your handbook, look at the MLA section, look at the MLA section in the handbook that you were required to purchase for class. There's a whole section on how to create parenthetical citations and works cited pages for a variety of sources. There also is a sample paper at the end of that MLA section. It's great because it will show you how to set up the first page. It's also great because it will show you what your works cited page should look like. I highly recommend using that because it will give you an idea for what you need to do. Okay, I'm now going to, this is the conclusion of the PowerPoint. Once again, when you go to the University of Mobile website, that includes the library page. You click on the library page. At some point, it will request your ID, which is your student ID number, and the password is, again, 5555. I'm going to stop sharing now, and then I'm going to close out my PowerPoint. Okay. And I'm going to return to Google. And I'm going to go back to Zoom and share the page again. And I'm going to, let's see, to get to the correct page here. I'm going to get to my Google page, and I'm going to show you how to get to the OWL page, because the little might be a little bit worrisome on how to do that. Google. All right. If you're worried, Google OWLPURDUEMLA. I'll show you what that looks like. MLA Formatting and Style Guide, Purdue OWL. Okay. I just Googled simply how to do it. Okay, that's fine. MLA Formatting and Style Guide. Okay. If you scroll down over here on the left, well, we had that going. Now I'm hungry for Whataburger. MLA Style Introduction, right here. MLA Formatting and Style Guide shows you how to format in-text citations, the basics, formatting quotations. Can I go up here? And I don't think I can see that. There we go. Annotate. I want to annotate for you. And so I'm over here on the left. MLA Style Introduction. Then we have the Formatting and Style Guide. Okay. Then the basics. MLA Formatting Quotations. We're not using endnotes and footnotes. Don't pay attention to that. Pretend you didn't see it. MLA Works Cited Page Basic Format. Okay, I'm going to click on that and pray that it takes us there. Well, I have to have the mouse. Okay. Let's see. Works Cited Page. Wait. Sample. Scroll down. MLA Works Cited Page. Works Cited. Over here. Works Cited. This is a sample. You'll notice that it is alphabetized by the author's last name. I'm about to wind up with another ad. And okay, I'm going to scroll down a little bit so that you can see a little bit more. I'm going to make this bigger. Okay. So you have a sample works cited page here. You'll notice that it is alphabetized by author's last name. There are no numbers. There's no 1 beside Dean, no 2 beside Ebert, no 3 beside Gowdy. However, D, E, G, H, that appears in alphabetical order. You will also notice, just as an aside, An Inconvenient Truth is alphabetized by the letter I because A, An, and the do not count in a title. Okay, so I'm going to, that's your sample works cited page. We also have a sample paper here that we can look at. And it is annotated in a way that is similar to the one that is in your textbook. Okay, so they tell you here, let's see, that they explain to you how that header looks and why it should look like that. It says your name, the professor's name, the course number, and the date of the paper are double-spaced in 12-point Times New Roman font. I'm reading this little blue book, excuse me, little blue box next to the header here. So really everything that you need to know about the works cited page can be found at Purdue. You can look there to find all of that information. You can also look on, if this is the, if you are in the fall 2020 class, go to, if you go to your Canvas page for the class. All right, first, here you know how to upload your paper once you finish it. Here is the Big Mac style guide. I hope this is showing up in the shared screen. I hope this is working. And then at the bottom of your syllabus page, there is a video on steps to do JSTOR research There is a video on citing sources in MLA style, a basic introduction, MLA style works cited list, citing journal articles, and then there's a video at the bottom. Oh, another 2 videos, how to cite websites and how to cite books. So pretty much everything is there in video form, in a link form. You should be able to find what you need. Okay, so if you have questions, feel free to message me over the break as well. It's not quite Christmas break, but as you were working on your papers, feel free to message me if you have questions, and I will try to help you with those things. Thank you very much.